Clinical AI is one of the most demanding deployment environments right now. For it to work, there are so many factors that have to align together. The model has to work, the hardware has to work, there has to be a very complicated regulatory pathway that has to be navigated. So you've got FDA, PMA, clinical trials, and all of that has to be checked off before that clinical AI can be allowed anywhere near a patient. A lot of the AI applications in healthcare never survive that distance, and much of the focus in the industry right now has been on closing that gap between a good research result and what a surgeon can trust and use inside a live procedure. And my guest today knows how or what it takes to close that gap. He has been working over 1.5 decade at GE Healthcare, developing AI-driven MRI applications at global scale. His team right now at Perimeter has developed Clear, which is the first FDA PMA approved AI device used inside live cancer surgeries. I'm very excited to learn from Ersin where, with the current pace of AI and agentic systems, clinical medicine is headed, and what does the future hold for healthcare? The one of the most regulated, consequential industries in the world. So, without further ado, let's dive right in. So first, I want to kick this off with a question, that take us on the journey that our guests usually have been, right? Being in this industry for over 2 decades, from MRI labs to GE Healthcare to now creating the first FDA-approved AI device used in cancer surgery. Walk me through how you have personally seen this field evolve, and tell us some of the most transformational on the ground shifts.
Sure. Yeah, I would out myself in terms of age, but when I started, AI I was in my PhD days and just doing these cool projects. The results were similar to your analytical formulas or iterative type of results, maybe slightly better, slightly worse, but we did not have GPUs. We did not have the many of the things, so it was really missing a bunch of the pieces of the puzzle. So in time, I think it was this perfect storm. We had compute bottleneck. The gaming industry opened up the doors with the GPUs to the AI compute bottlenecks. We had massive data, but it was fragmented. So people, when they get the compute power, now you can go after the data. So it's then with more digital tools as we move things to a digital world, the data became very available, especially in healthcare. A typical hospital on an annual basis generates petabytes of data. We're not talking in the terabytes. So every day they can fill up your laptop multiple times over with the
Yeah.
amount of data that is generated. So you have the data, you have the this compute power, and then the other piece is the need is there too. We have physician, healthcare professionals shortage. They cannot keep up. The data is exponentially growing, but you don't have the human trained experts to really keep up with that incoming data. So AI kind of felt really nicely into that space. And things that were taking very minimal time, like really long time for us to do now, it's just not a challenge with AI now. And if I look at AI, I was in radiology space. So the AI company started in a small corner. The radiology RSNA is a big radiology conference where all the imaging vendors and in radiology space exhibit. And they had a little bit of a corner in maybe 10, 20 companies were showcasing their AI. And from that, it took over the whole wing in Chicago, basically. It just grew over 200 companies. Every big company had another booth in that area. So it became mainstream in a very rapid fashion. Like within 5 to 10 years, the growth is exponential and exciting.
And how because we saw that there was a research phase where there were more research papers, and then slowly moved into the integration of AI into softwares as well, right? How the has the clinical trust been, over the years, not just on the technology itself, but on the software and the performance that the doctors and physicians have been able to see from that? How has the trust evolved?
Trust is, I think, definitely getting there, but there is still ways to go. If you look at the models that are like you're testing on a sequestered test data, no matter what you do, you will be a fraction of the data that in the clinical use case you would see with that model.
Yeah.
So, and to be able to trust the AI and use it, uh, clinicians, of course, understandably, they want the evidence upfront. So you need to generate the generalizability of the model. You need to have the transparency of the model, what it is thinking. If you keep it as a black box, that the trust is, I would say, rather low. And if you have a small sequester test set that doesn't really scale to demonstrate the generalizability of the model, then the trust will be low as well. So that's why I think this key aspect was probably one of the reasons, along with the reimbursement related other challenges, but one of the key paramount factors that many of the AI tools in healthcare came in the productivity gains. So it wasn't
Mm,
in the clinical decision making as much.
mm.
Most of them are making the lives easier for the healthcare professionals, streamlining these
Workflows,
repetitive
yeah.
mundane task workflows, automating things, and then just those type of gains is a lot easier to adapt. And then because the factor is not as high as a clinical decision support system like our product has.
Right. And speaking about models, when they go into the detection of diseases, right, where again the trust factor comes in. I want to talk about multimodal AI. And for
Sure.
the last 5 years, AI in the healthcare we've seen has been just one model for imaging, one for labs, one another for EHR data, right? They didn't really talk to each other,
Yeah.
and now we see that multimodal AI has really starting to change that.
Yeah.
Now, how do you think, how close are we to systems, that can truly reason across imaging, genomics, clinical notes, and now wearables as well, right? In a
Yeah.
clinically meaningful way.
Yeah, I would say probably we are closer than most clinicians are thinking, but we are probably also further than most technologists claim as well. So it's probably the reality is in between somewhere right now. We are seeing multimodal implementations, but I'm going to tie it back to your trust factor now, the clinical trust. When you have it started with these one model, one specific task. You have one trick ponies because the data is confined. The data is fragmented. Getting all the data at a large, massive scale is substantially bigger task than getting, let's say, imaging data by itself. So you can make something with the imaging data very quickly, and the need is there. The sense of urgency is there. So it was easier for the companies and the academic world to focus on the single data at hand and then do a single focused AI models.
Hmm.
As you add more data, you can do a lot more, just like agentic AI. It's not like you're chatting with LLM. The agentic AI, once you start doing more things, the value goes up exponentially. Multimodal, again, I think a critical part for that one. I think the challenge we have is interpretability. What I mean by that is now you're not dealing with one expert in the human in the loop parts. You have to have multiple experts. For us to advance, we had subspecialties in healthcare medical field. So you have to have your pathologist, your radiologist, your surgeon. So you have to have a cross-functional team to be able to assess these models, develop these models. So that just makes the bar a lot higher. I am. You did mention also the variables. I'm really excited about the variables because that is the point of care use. It's like the you can get to exponentially more patients. You can touch people before they become symptomatic, before they need a doctor. They might need a doctor in near future, but if you intervene earlier, we can then triage the patients a lot faster, and then the human experts can focus on the patients that really need their help more. So if we can make intervene, so move from reactive medicine to preventive medicine, and that would be possible with AI because AI could be able to make the initial triaging and then flagging things look normal or I'm seeing something problematic. Let me flag this
Mm.
to your primary care physician or others. So you can just take control of your health with the variables. And I think we'll see more of these.
Yeah, and like because for these devices, for all of this to work, would see like these models try and get more capable, and like ingest way more signals, right?
Yeah.
Again, a lot of data points. Do you think that the black box problem could get harder when it does that? And uh, who would be responsible if like that model, a multi-model model, uh, goes wrong, goes off the track?
Uh, that is possible. So that's why I said like when it is a multimodal, multiple expertise, finding the if it starts hallucinating, the model
Yeah.
is off track. So it would become a bit more challenging. The developers need to plug in the necessary flags and safeguards to monitor. Like field monitoring is a key aspect of this. So how do we do that field monitoring? And also, how do you respect the patient privacy? So there's still a lot of these multifaceted problems we have to solve. Sharing your data with a technical developer would help immensely to solve these challenges where the AI model, it's, as I said, it's really difficult to generalize models. So you'll have a massive population, and with the massive population, you'll have asymptomatic people. They'll have some kind of condition. I bet more than 1 in 5 people will have some condition that is clinically significant that they are not even aware of today if we start monitoring the general population. So how do you get that data to flag that your model is missing on those? So it's a black box to both sides. So developers would not see the data from a black box perspective. So they won't have access to that data, that they won't see their model is going off the rails. And then the patients would not have the trust. Okay, my data would be shared with someone else that I haven't given. So this can be used and really invade my privacy and personal life as well. So there is still a lot to be done to build the right framework to, I think, solve these challenges.
Yeah, and speaking about frameworks, like when the question of responsible AI comes into this, because I think this is one of the fields where responsible AI takes a lot of precedence, uh, and we know that every company, whether they're creating softwares, whether they're creating medical devices, there are frameworks that exist, there are principles that have been published, right? But the thing is that the consequences of a biased or a brittle model are clinical, right? And things can go very wrong in multiple different environments and different scenarios, right? So where do you think like responsible AI, even building starting from the foundation, could actually gets embedded in healthcare,
Yeah.
and in the life cycle, in the process, where does it matter most to you?
Um, it is hard to say where it matters most because it's you would be as strong as your weakest link. So if you fail on one, you're,
Uh,
you're going to
yeah.
fail in across board. So the healthcare, the bar is really high. You're dealing with the human lives. So I would say there are. three areas this is really relevant. One is um, you're forming your training data. You make sure that your data is representative of the demographics that you are targeting, having the large enough data set to train a model and make sure that is generalizable. So annotating it with the highest quality, pulling subject matter experts, clinicians into your labeling process to be able to annotate that data in the quality. So it's not just the quantity that matters. You have to also have the quality.
Yeah.
I might have maybe thousands of cases, but we are dealing with cancer, breast cancer specifically. There will be fewer cases of positive cases. So when you have a positive margin, the patient had a surgery, and then there's some residual cancer left. That will be fewer than your successful surgeries, and that might happen on one single margin in a smaller area. So a number of images that have a positive suspicious feature will be far in between than your negative cases. So you need to really focus on the cases that would be relevant to your model. Like you have to do some hard online mining. So you look into data that really your model is more struggling with, get those cases, label them. So that really, if your responsible AI starts with your annotation part. Then the second piece is your, I would call it validation from the FDA language. So you have to build a large enough sequestered test data that is not coming from a single source, that comes from multiple sources. You would have community hospitals, you would have academic tertiary centers, you would have outpatient surgical centers. So you have to have a mix of not just the hospital types, you have to also look into the demographics of the population. For our case, patients at a certain age group would need to be there, but then you have younger breast cancer patients as well. So you have to have adequate representation of your data to cater to that group as well. So that is your sequestered test data in the AI world needs to be really robust, and it needs to be accurately with a clinician in the loop. You have to have a subject matter expert, the clinical expert, labeling your data with you. So they might do a auditing and then approval of those, but then you have to get that clinician in the loop. So that's your responsible AI in that part as well. The third part that is probably the most critical is the field monitoring, and that might be the most neglected. So once you're out, it's usual, I think, for many technical teams to, okay, what is next? Let me go in and find another idea, build another model for another use case. But your model is live in the field now. If it is hallucinating, it is hallucinating. It is causing some mistakes that is happening in the field. And it is practically impossible for you to oversee and vision every possible use case scenarios and factor those in. I'll give a quick example. Our device is a vacuum system, so it vacuums, that stabilizes the specimen. The specimen doesn't move, so we can really get really nice, accurate images of the margin. But the specimen might be too big, or the end user might think that they are holding up the specimen to stabilize it. So and you add your fingers to it, so you're holding it with your hand.
Yeah.
Now you're seeing fingers in the image, like that is not something we had in our original training data. So we had to go back and then add that type of data once we start seeing that type of thing early on before the clinical trial started. And then when you have holding with the hand, your hand will cause subtle, minute vibrations. That is at the micro level, but the image might look slightly blurrier. So how do you factor all these different clinical use cases that is not in your lab, in your sterile environment of labeling the data? So you have to have, you will have, it starts with a, in a sense, understanding and agreeing that you will have an imperfect world. Your device will be used in ways that you haven't really imagined in the lab when you're building and developing. You have to really look into your monitoring or field monitoring and then grab the data that and then update it. This is really critical. I think this was a good reason why FDA also added predetermined change control plan. You don't have to go back to FDA when you're having your AI solutions. You can submit upfront with your original submission. These are my plan changes. More data retraining is a very valid part of that PCCP path. So field monitoring becomes a lot easier. So there's no excuse to not to go and field monitor, find the failure modes, and add that data. I would say those are the three areas I would focus on with the responsible AI. And then the final piece is once you get all of these, you have to tell your story to the clinicians as well. You have to make it transparent that you need to show them that what you have built is responsible and ethical AI. So you can raise that trust factor that we discussed earlier today.
Yeah, right. So, like, it starts with data collection, moves to model
Yep.
development, moves to clinical validation, and then post-market monitoring. It's like a
It
continuous
is
circle of,
total quality, total responsible AI. So it's not just one piece. You have to do it across the board.
yeah. And like, have you currently seen this kind of, I would say, practices, currently being done actively?
Um, the FDA actually looks into when you're submitting, they want you to have your field monitoring related plans. How are you monitoring the model? How are you testing it? Your you have to add your confidence intervals. So the regulations in some way slows you down, but it also puts the safety guards for everyone. So you have to have a. It really raises in healthcare. I think everyone does this to a certain acceptable standard to be able to get it cleared through the FDA. And you have to do it. Um, Updating your models in the field will be far more costly, and then you will also lose your customers' trust in that. You cannot keep iterating on it on a regular basis because of some bugs or other things. So you have to do it for your own sake as well.
So, moving on. I want to talk about now manufacturing, devices with the integration of AI, right? Your 17 years at GE Healthcare, I'm sure, gives you a very profound lens into the manufacturing part as well, with integration right now of artificial intelligence, right? I'm sure you understand that shipping an intelligence system into hospitals is not just about software development, right? It's a physical device that is getting manufactured, calibrated, and most importantly, being always kept compliant to the regulations that are continuously evolving, right? So, over the last couple of years, what do you think the industry quite often overlook when uh, to understand what it actually takes to bring an intelligent medical device from development into like real clinical use?
Um, I would say um, the field data monitoring is probably the hardest because it happens after you release your product, and then you might have a plan, but you don't have to have all the execution of it yet. So you will monitor it. So I would say probably field monitoring is one key component because it does have significant logistical challenges. How are you going to grab the data from the sites for you cannot keep grabbing every data out there. So you need to have the logic in place. You need to build your device with the redundancies or the implementations in place so that when you see something potentially going in the wrong direction, let's say you have to have these confidence values of your AI's decision making, you need to put some logging mechanism to get a sense of if it is doing the right thing or not. So you have to then build these scripts. You cannot do a manual monitoring. Like you will have many devices running on a continuous basis. It's not something you can do with a manual humans in the loop. You have to add some automation and intelligence into that part, field monitoring as well, but it doesn't directly provide value to the product that you're developing. So you're racing against
Hmm.
time. You want to get something to product to the hands of customers. That will require a substantial effort. You will be running maybe clinical trials like we did, a multi-center trial. You have to support those trials. You're building your model, you're testing your model, all that stuff. But Once you release it, what happens with that model? I think that piece, in my opinion, is probably the one key piece. It needs a platform, and that is probably the most overlooked part from that perspective. The other piece, I think the most critical one for me that will really define also the success of an AI solution, the adoption, is the value proposition. You don't want to do the AI for the sake of AI. You're just doing some new shiny toy. It really needs to solve a meaningful clinical problem that is not doable in a way with just the humans. You don't want to make it look like this is just a one extra shiny toy. Like it's learning a new tool. Like these clinicians, they don't have the time and bandwidth to. There are, I think, 1,500 AI FDA cleared AI solutions now. How do you make that human AI usability factor so that your end users are not struggling with your AI and they're saying, so that usability I think is another part you need to really focus on, and that might be also a bit overlooked because these are not in a vacuum AI autonomous decision makers. In healthcare, you will always have human in the loop. How do you present your AI's findings to the end users, your clinicians, your surgeons, your radiologists, so that they can make a decision right away, quickly, without really struggling to use your device, user interface, usability, and then interpretability of the AIs? How do you make that easier for them to look at it? All these factors, I think, I would say, needs maybe more focus than today.
Right. And like for like smaller, commercial stage companies,
Yep.
I would say like those who have fewer resources.
Yeah,
Uh, how important are these architectural decisions, especially when they are creating these devices and putting these models onto these devices? Because I would say few resources mean these decisions have to be right the first time. The margin of error is very
absolutely.
lower.
Yep. Yep. That is definitely a key aspect. So if I look at smaller companies like ours, like the initial training data, collecting that data, especially if you're using your own device, like you're not a mainstream tool, like you're building on top of an X-ray or mammogram that are readily available, you can grab publicly available data sets and then keep building on it. But in our case, AI model uses our own device images, so we have to have those. Our ground truth is histopathology report. We have to grab those. Combining all of that is a very costly and time-consuming proposition. So the training took several years to build up that database to be able to do it, and then to demonstrate what FDA is expecting out of our device. We were in the PMA path, was also a multi-center, multi-surgeon, like a massive clinical trial that was several years running. Then we had also COVID, so that really prolonged the trial itself. So, and you are burning cash on the site. So these are really not easy items. So that is one key item, I think, if I would plug my plea for smaller companies. If I look at the AI model development, the big companies like Google and others, they make their models open source. So you can take their model, you can apply transfer learning and then customize that to your need. So you don't
Mhm.
have to have that big R&D arm to come up with these state-of-the-art models. You
Yeah.
can really keep up with a small team on the development part. The real bottlenecks happen on the data front, and then the regulatory path, depending on where you are, that demonstrating that to the uh, levels that FDA is expecting, that proof point might be also costly. I think having some infrastructure to help these companies, maybe there are anonymized sequester test sets that would eliminate some of these bottlenecks. Having some mechanisms in place to be able to get the patient consents. You have to go to each hospital, like an IRB, maybe a generic IRB approval across board, like for these type of AI model developments, where you don't really use any PHI, person identifiable information about the patients. You're just using, let's say, an image. That doesn't matter where the image is coming, who the image is coming from. You might need an aggregate number on the statistics on, so that you can, like in a responsible AI, you can say this, my model is coming from both younger and older population, this type of
Mm.
patient cohort, things like that. You might need that type of information to track that, but if it is not fundamental to your model's development and reasoning, having those easier parts will help. And then I think lowering the regulatory burden on some of the things, like it is like there is no memory when you're going as a new submission. Another company might have done the exact same thing. You just have a better model. It might be better. You have to
Yeah.
go through your own path. So consolidating some of these things to like a faster pace. And then I would say we are using like you need to use AI tools. So areas where you to build these things. You can use Copilot, Google Cloud, so where you don't have the manpower to scale these internal development tools quickly. I think the companies can really tap into the AI to build those tools, and then you have to test that, make sure it is working properly. But it's not a clinical facing, like commercial clinical product, so you can utilize AI to help you to code those a lot faster.
Right. I would say that like it is like one of the factors that has prompted you to make that transition to move to perimeter, right?
Yeah, for me the exciting part with the perimeter was it was the our device was deemed as a breakthrough. It has the breakthrough designation from FDA, so you get your designation if you have a tangible, like really important change to the patient care. So, and then working from ground up, like there will be a clinical trial PMA level, and it's at the point of care solution. It's not like
Mm.
radiology. You are feeding to the radiologist. If you're wrong, you're just the gatekeeper. So there is biopsies and other things. Your decision might impact the action taken by the surgeon. So they might
Mm.
take an extra shape, or I mean, they might carve out more tissue because they think there's something suspicious. So the bar was a lot higher. And then on device, you have to look into cybersecurity concerns and many other things. And then smaller team, but an impact in an area that is not as highly explored. Like if I look at FDA's, I think over 1,500 now. 1,100 or 1,200 is in radiology by itself. So we were
Yeah.
one of the only 17 AI-powered PMAs in the world. This is a small company, so we were the first of its kind with a PCCP in that PMA space. So to be able to trailblaze in AI, so that impact can come from a big or small company. So that I was really happy to be part of that journey with Perimeter.
Amazing. And I want to bring in, clear. Uh, like you mentioned, it has become the FDA PMA approved first, AI-enabled imaging device for interoperative breast cancer margin
Gotcha.
assessment. Before I ask you a question, I wanted to share this, as that one in five, breast conserving surgeries in the US today ends in a second operation because margins were not clear, right? And that problem has existed for a decade despite AI being implemented, right, and multiple processes. uh, Tell me, like, what do you think, why AI took this long to get here,
Mhm.
and why is it arriving now? What has truly made that transition and that I would say impact possible now?
Yeah, again, there's never, I would say, a silver bullet to these items. So for us, if you look at conventional imaging modalities, MR, ultrasound, X-ray, so they are in the millimeter range, or they are in the 100 micron level type of a resolution. So when you do surgery, before the surgery, patient goes into what we call a pre-surgical imaging. So they get
Hmm.
an MR, ultrasound, like mammography. So they know the extent of the disease at the millimeter level, but disease at the cellular level. So there might be residual cancer that is not visible to those imaging modalities. So you might be measuring with those conventional modalities. The longest dimension of the tumor is seeing as maybe 3 centimeters, but it might be extending to 4.5 centimeters at the cellular level. It just has, but it's not visible at that level because resolution is not there. We are using optical coherence tomography. It's a more novel modality that if you go to an eye doctor and they do a retina scan, that's it. We are using that in a novel way for the surgical oncology setting. And the one key reason is light does not penetrate. Like we are using light to be able to image. So it doesn't penetrate too much. So we can go at most like about a 2 millimeter type of imaging depth. That 2 millimeter is enough though for the needs of, do you have the margins, like the boundaries of, do you have some tumor, residual tumor left or not? Because you're not interested in the depth imaging. Unlike radiology, where these devices were used to do whole anatomy, whole organ type imaging, because you're looking for something. Do they have cancer or not? In our
Yeah.
case, we know there is cancer. So this is a purpose specific implementation.
Yeah.
So we know there is cancer. The patient is treated for that. We know if there is any residual cancer. So with OCT, we are able to image in the 15, 20 micron range. So we are at the micron level. So we are seeing at really a lot higher resolution. That higher resolution now opens it up. So now you have the data. Again, earlier data quality was not there because the resolution was not there. With our
Mm.
imaging, there was a long history. The company built OCT imaging that needs to be suitable for, it's not like a spot imaging. Now you have to have like, it's kind of like a panoramic mode with OCT. We just scan the entire specimen surface. We stitch those smaller images. You get one panoramic view, and then you have hundreds of images per margin. So we built that. And then if it was one or two images like X-ray, then you don't need a human, you don't need an AI to guide the human expert surgeons per margin. When you have resolution, you have very small cuts of images, stacks of these images. You have several hundred, 200 to 300 images per margin. So a surgeon might be able to scan through those images, but patient is sedated, they're on the table, they're in the surgery. You have to do it very rapidly. So this is like then needed a AI-based navigation guidance system, GPS, effectively, to take surgeon to the area of interest so they can really say, oh, I am seeing some residual cancer, I'm going to take an action. So it was a buildup of a hardware imaging device that will generate the right data, and then collecting several years of data with your device to be able to build that database so that you can build a generalizable model. And then that was not the end of the story. Then you had to have these several years long clinical trial to demonstrate the safety and efficacy of your device against the clinical standard across multiple sites, multiple surgeons, and then submitting that to FDA. That it was one of its kind, first of its kind, and then we were assigned to the PMA path. That just takes longer than your normal typical 510K, where the maybe the decision will be a lot easier. So when you add that, it's never an easy single path. So it took a long time, but we are there now. Long story
Brilliant.
short.
Yeah, and I would say, especially we talked about intraoperative decision support. That means that, the support has to be in the surgery room while the
Yeah.
patient is on the table, right? And the device would be running inference in like what, 10 milliseconds, right? And I feel like this changes the game because we know that previously clinical AI used to operate on a loop where it was measured in hours or sometimes even days as well. You scan, you analyze, you get the report, then you act, right? But this is we're talking about results in real time,
Yes.
and I feel like that completely changes, and I think the requirements are continuously changing as well that the system has to meet, I would say, technically and clinically as well.
Uh, Yeah, absolutely. So let's take, because it is on device near real time. We have to give an immediate result to the surgeon. You cannot
Yeah.
build like for our data labeling training part. We have built an ensemble of AI models. We don't care how long that takes. So we want the highest accuracy to pre-label the data for human experts to kind of go over that. So you don't care how long your inferencing takes in that space, but in real clinical use, Similarly, in radiology, radiology is looking at it, but the patient will not need a decision at that point. So you can have like a minutes long inferencing time. The accuracy is more important. In our case, patient is sedated at the time of surgery, and you cannot prolong the surgery time to do this. So you have to make the decision there. And to avoid any cybersecurity concerns, things like that, we didn't put it on the cloud either. So if you have connectivity to the cloud, you have to address the cybersecurity related items. There's more. So we are doing on-premise, on-device, the local GPU. This so you have to have these inferencing requirements that needs to fit in, and the surgery should not take any longer than what they typically are doing, so that you don't run into scheduling problems. But that is one constraint you have to live with, but then you cannot compromise your clinical performance. This you're dealing with surgical oncology. So you have to be really right. So your clinical performance, how well you're identifying suspicious features, that has to be really high. And then you also have to you cannot say everything is positive. So you have to have very high specificity as well. So when you see a negative margin, clean margin, the AI model needs to also understand do no harm, basically do not flag redundant
Mm,
false
mm.
positives. So you have a very high clinical bar, you have a high technical bar from an inferencing perspective. So you have to, that really takes a time and effort to customize your models. It's not like in a day you can come up with a model. It also requires subject domain expertise, how the physical features look in OCT images, the cancer features. Like you need to understand what AI is flagging. So it's an iterative development. The bar is a lot higher for sure.
Yeah, and are you ensuring to create measures, put measures in place to tackle with cloud latency? Because I would say the model has to be computationally lean enough
Yep.
to run on a device.
Yep. Yeah, as I said, today we are not on a cloud. So that would have opened up a lot more challenges for us to get
Mm,
deploy the device, the connectivity. So that was an intentional decision to do an on-premise. So data never leaves hospitals. The data belongs to the hospital. So there's no data rights related concerns, patient privacy related concerns. So we just do it on device, and then we generate the results. The data never comes to our facility. So we had to look into that. The latency when we are building our models, we have an explicit requirement on data latency. So when we are testing it, a model that needs to get into the product candidate list, it has to fit into those latency requirements. We do have performance related requirements. And then now that we have the model out in the field running for clinical use, as we iterate, we also do a concordance metrics. What I mean, like not any new model we are deploying to the field via PCCP or like the PMA supplement, we are looking into that it is non-inferior to the previous model. And then we also say it is also concordant to the previous baseline model, what is out in the field. What I mean by concordance is when your model fails, it doesn't introduce new failure modes. So the surgeons are used to maybe seeing a certain failures, like there might be some mimickers that might be a false positive. You don't suddenly change it up and then you generate a completely new set of false positives to them. So you don't want to create a complete new learning curve for them. It needs to keep building up over the previous baseline. So we look into KPIs on the behavioral consistency as well. So it does take multiple gating tests before something goes into product. So the bar needs to be really high for those.
yeah, yeah. And speaking about the setting those bar, uh, I'll go back to the question of ensuring the right data on which these models are trained. Right, I learned that Clear AI was trained on over 2 million proprietary OCD images. Right, and that library is what makes the whole thing possible. And then, of course, every new surgery keeps adding to it, right?
Yep.
You have personally led improvements to its labeling pipelines, parameters labeling pipelines. So tell me, like, what does the building like a corpus of almost 2 million OCD images actually look like from inside? And in that process, where quality matters the most.
Yeah, yeah. It is definitely a years long process. It's not like it happens overnight. So you
Yeah,
have to have data agreements with your collaborator institutions, collaborators. So you look into the data sharing agreements, you look into institutional review board approvals because the data, so ethics committee approvals, you look into patient consent, every data, you need to get the consent that the data needs to be, can be used for developing AI models that might become a product. And then you have to also have the right scripts in place to strip out any patient identified information, patient privacy, HIPAA, these type of concerns is really paramount. Not only these, but then once you have the data, you have to have the data governance. You have to have the redundancy. You cannot corrupt your data. You cannot have your data in one only spot. So you have to have these access rights. Who can access to that data? Then you have to have your sequester tested that is not accessible to your development team in any way possible. So you have to have in a really your final test will be a blinded test. You would have no access to what it is doing with that. That's true test of generalizability of the model. You have to build the necessary infrastructure to be able to handle these large data sets.
yeah,
You have to have the redundancy access related policies to be sorted out. And then data sitting there is not really helpful. You have to label, annotate that data. There is the major investment from the company into the human expertise. So you have to have the credentialing of people who can label your data. You cannot have randomly your someone 3 months on the job start labeling your data because you're telling the AI this is suspicious, this is not suspicious, based on histopathology reports. So if they say something that is suspicious is non-suspicious, you're biasing your model to learn the wrong features. So then you have to put the necessary checks and balances in your labeling quality control. Then you have to check those. And so you can see you just have so many layers of onion you have to do, and then everything needs to really work, function as accurate as possible. And then the other benefit is if you have the partners outside, like you can have these sharing data sharing agreements. So once your device is out in the field, actually, that is when you can really massively generate your data. That this was to get to the data to the your model to the product. But once the model is in product, now it's real usage when it is failing. What is happening with the data? If it is struggling with certain type of population, you have the field monitoring of that. You have to build the infrastructure to those items to be accurately captured as well. But our devices used substantially more in the clinical setting than what we have built in years with our training data. So if we can tap into that, the potential is massive. We don't need any PHI, any human, like the patient identifiable information. So if we can have our access to that clinical data with the ground truth histopathology results, we would be able to massively improve our model. So that's also need to build that side of the fence. Now you have to look into connectivity. You cannot just manually just keep burning USBs and things like that to grab that data. So we have to build the infrastructure to listen
right.
in and collect that data seamlessly.
And do you think that like the competitive advantage could be more towards rather than just creating algorithms, but the ability to build, curate, and continuously improve proprietary data sets?
100%. I think you just hit the nail on the head. To me, I think the data is the much harder part. Once you have the data, the model development is a lot easier. It does need a certain clinical depth of domain expertise. You cannot have someone who is a, let's say, an AI modeling engineer. Like they're just doing with LLMs. You cannot just have them build a model for you. That needs some medical imaging expertise or OCT imaging expertise. But that is a much smaller than challenge than the data aspects. So that proprietary atlas, the database, is the critical value, and that will take years for anyone try to get there, and then the cost will be prohibitive too.
Hmm. And this like brings me to an interesting topic that I wanted to discuss with you, which is like, so we know that Clear is trained on like millions of OCD images, right?
Mhm.
Uh, and supervised learning ultimately depends on human labels.
Yes.
But I'm reading about like how AI researchers are exploring self-supervised and
Yeah.
predictive approaches that learn from the world itself rather than annotated examples, right? So, for example, researchers like Jan LeCun, who was previously chief AI scientist at Meta,
Yeah.
led this, development of a model called JEPA, right?
Mhm.
Which is designed to learn internal models of the world, right?
Yep.
Understanding relationships and predicting what should happen next, rather than simply just generating text or classifying images.
Yep.
And the idea is that intelligence should come not just from pattern matching, but from building representations of how the physical world actually works. So, like, when you think about medical imaging and surgeries, do you see a role for these kind of world models? Could they eventually help systems move beyond recognizing tissue patterns or to developing, deeper understanding of anatomy, disease progressions?
Yeah, yeah, self-supervised learning. Actually, there's a field and there's a significant interest in the healthcare setting to these foundational models. The
Hmm.
foundational models are basically self-supervised, so they need massively more data than your supervised learning. So I see the supervised learning as the practical step because data
Towards
is limited and you're building these, as I call, one-trick pony AI models. They're doing one specific task. So that one can be done with a smaller data set. And then you supervise it, it can learn a lot quicker. Then they run into generalizability issues, things like that. But if it is a very narrow-minded task, then they excel in that. So with the foundational models, you build that technical debt you paid upfront. So AI to learn and self-supervise, you need massively more data. How do you collect that much data? So this is, I think, institutions that have access to data, they are the data generators, like these luminary hospitals, big imaging chains, like in radiology, they do have the massive data sets. That's those are the type of, I think, companies, institutions, they can go after this because they do have the massive data. So once you get to this level, and then we've been building it, so I feel like, I think in the future, labeling it is becoming more of a, data is the bottleneck. How do you label that much massive data? And you want to make the models really evolve. And you don't want to also have these models to do one specific task. If you do, let's say, foundational models, you can build it for MR and then CT, ultrasound. So generalizability is far better with the foundational models, and you're not labeling data. So getting the first reliable model will take time, but then you will have massive benefits because you can apply it across the spectrum, not just one single disease. You can have a foundational model that really addresses multiple areas. So it is being worked on. I think there was at least one foundational model cleared by FDA as well. So it's good to see that things are coming down the pipe with that.
Yeah, awesome. And I would say, clinical data is scarce, fragmented, expensive to label, and always, I think, most of the time, subject to like strict privacy requirements as well, right? But like, how do you prevent weaknesses in one stage from propagating through the system, right? When you are moving in the pipeline, like from acquisition and annotation to validation and then uh, deployment.
Uh, that is a tough one. I mean, you can only do, I mean, you do your earnest and the best to not to have any weaknesses, but when you have the weakness, like let's say you don't have enough data, you have to put maybe some safeguards. You cannot be really aggressive in your implementation claims, like what you can do, and then you have to have the proper labeling. Disclose this to the patients, and then not to the patients only, but also the clinical end users. So have them know about the limitations. So yeah, you may not be able to like perfect stand in the way of good. You might be really good at like 9 things or 8 things out of 10. That might still be very impactful to the clinicians. So release it with the 8, but then labeling comes into play. So you label your release notes. You have the limitations clearly identified. Don't try to claim more than what you could do. And if they know exactly your claims, I think that really also adds to the trust. You know, I am not doing this XYZ. This is not meant to be used for that XYZ purposes. You just clearly outline that one, and then your labeling covers the limitations. So that is one way to, I think, handle that. Be
Mm,
really transparent to the end users about your model's performance.
right. Okay, I want to move to talking about computer vision because in your even at Perimeter, you create manufacturing these devices, and computer vision is a technology that we know so far has truly proven itself on factory floors for high volume industries, right? And but for medical device manufacturing, the conditions are fundamentally very different because uh, of the tolerances and the consequences of the defect. Of it's not just about a return or a recall, it's about a patient outcome. uh, when we talk about computer vision, what do you think it truly differentiates itself, not just in terms of efficiency but patient safety as well, when it's these devices are being created on the factory floors?
Um, yeah, that is where I think the regulatory component comes into play for the healthcare. Like, as I mentioned, radiology has the lion's share of the AI-enabled device approvals from FDA, over 80% of them, more than 1,000. So every one of them uses medical images, and most of these AI-enabled solutions are computer vision solutions. They look into images and they are either a decision support system, so they are
Mhm.
providing some benefits to the physician, or they are triaging, let's say, more critical cases and move them up front. We call them CAT-T, computer detection triage tools. So you prioritize. So this your attending physician, radiologist, ER physician, they look into the cases that are more relevant. You detect sepsis, you detect pneumonia, COVID, so the AI, so they are just doing basically more work for the clinicians, so make their life easier. But every one of them, especially these clinically relevant ones, goes into the category that you mentioned. Every single one of them through the FDA approval will have to demonstrate their performance at the clinical metrics. The FDA will expect you to provide sensitivity, specificity against the demographics that you're intended to work with. So we have to demonstrate that across the multiple sites, multiple surgeons, that thousands of margins from hundreds of patients that got into. So we have demonstrated the AI's efficacy and performance alone, even though it wasn't intended to be working by itself, it was intended to work with a surgeon in the loop. The surgeon will make the ultimate decision. But we had to demonstrate individual performance, standalone performance of the AI model. So your clinical performance metrics will be clearly captured as part of your regulatory submission. So there is no cutting around. So we can never do, let's say there is a new ChatGPT version 5 came in, and some of our AI colleagues not in this regulated industries, within hours, days, oh, we have a new version with this new one, and slap it in, it's in product. It may or may not work, but they are the failure is not as catastrophic, so they're not in regulated, so they can take it. In our case, even let's say our PCCP, we're not going to the FDA to get an approval. We have to, in our design history file, we have to document its standalone performance against the baseline model. And then, as I mentioned, not only non-inferiority on clinical metrics, but also we have to also show that it is concordant with the behavior is stable between different versions. All of that gets documented. We have to do these independent testing, validation. So there is a lot of work that happens after you finalize your model before you release it to the hands of the end users. So that part I believe is nicely covered in regulated industries. I have always worked in healthcare, so I don't know the other computer vision related applications, what they do for their reliability aspects.
Right. And while these devices are being manufactured, right, how do you distribute responsibility, responsible principles across hardware, imaging, embedding the software, and then the clinical workflow design as well, while during the manufacturing process? Like, what does that process looks like? Is it like a whole different kind of, software and application that is designed to ensure all those, factors come together as one and checked?
Yeah, it takes a really a village to release something like this. Basically, we have our regulatory team. They are involved when we are making changes. Does this fit into our PCCP or that needs a PMA supplement? That you scope out your timelines and effort needed. Our clinical team members, they look into it. What is the clinical proof points we need to demonstrate? Product team is involved. What are you trying to solve? Like your user requirements comes from your product team. They they kind of set the bar for you in terms of the performance goals, what you want to do with that product. So, and then you have your clinical teams that are using your device in the field with the customers, training customers. So they give you their feedback and then they test your models internally before you release it to commercially. So you have all that stuff. We do it. My team does the data related part, but then we rely on clinical experts for the labeling of the data. And then once we build a model, we test it offline first, and we just do a bunch of our own cross validations, test against our internal test data to make sure we have a model that could be a candidate model. And then we work with our engineering team to integrate that model on device. And then now it's a different ballgame because now you have to have real-time inferencing requirements. You test on those other aspects, the memory requirements. Is there a memory leakage? There is a problem. Does it crash the system? When they do back-to-back runs, what happens with this robustness of your model? It cannot crash. Like it has to clean up the memory. You cannot have those things. So you just really do a lot more verification validation activities. Once you package everything, then you have to go through your formal verification validation procedures to demonstrate, as I mentioned, all those non-inferiority concordance against the previous model. Once you package all of that stuff, you have to now train the end users. You have to look into labeling. Do you need to update your labeling because your performance metrics change? You're
Yeah.
communicating with end users. And then your product team, commercial launch, your commercial team, they have to work on training modules to explain the benefit to the end user and how they could get the best value out of the new release. Because if you don't educate the end users, they may not be using it in the proper manner. So limitations needs to be educated. So you communicate all that stuff. You get it. And then you also have the field monitoring. Does it really behave as you hope that it is behaving? So then you look into infantile failure rates, things like that. You just look at your metrics. There's there anything? So you have to then kind of quickly look into a corrective action, preventive action type, like the quality related initiatives as well to make sure that the model is functioning as envisioned in the field too. So wing to wing, you have to do really your due diligence to release something to the clinical field.
Yeah. Truly, I think, yeah, it does take a village to get it off the factory
Absolutely,
floor.
absolutely.
Correct. All right, moving to the end, I want to talk about, democratization of AI, especially in diagnostic capabilities across rural areas, right?
Yep.
And want to talk like how we can see from community hospital in Texas to a surgical center in Nairobi that can access, the same imaging intelligence as the best centers in the world, from like technology, infrastructure, or software, or healthcare system standpoint. Like, what do you think needs to happen, to make that vision truly practical?
Um, First of all, I think the models and the usage needs to go to the patients rather than expecting patients to travel to these imaging centers or the hospitals. So to truly democratize it, you have to get it to point of care type of solutions. So you have to have cheap implementations that has AI. I've seen really nice use cases in ultrasound that you have a small probe that you connect to your smartphone. Everyone has a smartphone. Like you go to third world countries, everyone has a smartphone, or someone nearby them will have. So it's very widely accessible. So the ultrasound device basically streams the images to the smartphone. You don't need a big machine. So all that miniaturization, the compute power is getting better. So really small devices would have the power to be able to do these with AI. And with the smartphones, you also have the connectivity, right? You can just pipe the data to the smartphone, and the smartphone can upload it to cloud, and then you can have a model that runs globally. Um, and then it flags to the end user. Not only you can also guide them, like you can give the feedback with AI, tilt left, tilt right. So because you have to solve that barrier, you don't have the clinical experts, they're not trained to use these things. You need to make it a commoditized mainstream application. So to be able to do that, you can use AI to reduce that knowledge barrier. AI can take over image prescriptions or like the navigation of with your imaging devices or things like that. So you can get the feedback. Rotate 20 degrees to the right, left, like you can give visual cues, go this way, that way on the image. And then once the image is gotten, AI can make the initial pass on, is this seeing something clinically significant or not? And then it can flag it. That way, you don't have any radiologists or sonographers involved. The person is basically doing this. You can use the data is critical. So you can look into urine tests, things like that. So people can accessible, like simple, cheap tests that can be complemented with AI. If I look at our device, it is in a sense a similar story. Um, Ultimately, what you want is basically as the surgeon takes the specimen, you want the pathologist to look at that in a microscope and then tell you there is still cancer I'm seeing at the surface. But now you're locking you require a pathologist to be present in the surgical suite, and
Mhm.
you're wasting the surgical time. Instead of operating on more patients, you're just delaying that to be able to get the answer for that patient. That's why we have 1 in 5 patients today with a residual cancer. You don't have the pathologist at that time, and pathology itself has some limitations because pathologists sample very undersampled data. You have a full specimen; they just take cuts from different locations, and then close to the tumor, they think there might be another small tumor in another area that they didn't sample and they didn't review. So you might have sampling errors. But as a ground truth, pathologists might be able to tell, but you don't have pathologists readily available. And if you take this setting into rural hospitals, you're lucky to have a surgeon to begin with. Now you're demanding more subject matter experts, highly trained individuals. So with our device, if it sees something, it can flag to the surgeon. I am seeing something suspicious. Take a look at it, and that looks like what they have seen as this is like a DCIS, IDC type cancer features. I'm going to go ahead and take an extra shave. They can do it. So now, skill set of the surgeon doesn't have to be at the top notch level, right? So you do have a co-pilot effectively that is helping you with that decision. So that lowers the bar, reduces the dependency on human expertise. So you have to bring the AI to the areas where you lower the technical expertise needed, or you make it cheaper, more accessible. So you have to solve access problem, cost problem, and then the clinical value. So once you have those, I think cost, access, and the value part, you would have, I think, the right ingredient for a successful AI solution that will really democratize the healthcare, and we can reach the more
Right.
patients globally.
From an infrastructure, standpoint, creating like true infrastructures for these areas, how can that be like made possible, right? For devices such as the ones paramedical is creating.
Yeah, that is a question I'm struggling with as well. So I have a feeling every company is reinventing the wheel in terms of data governance. Like the data is your like the IP. It's very probably the most valuable part, especially for us, for instance, having that massive database. We
Yeah.
gathered that. Now we created a massive database. How do you manage that database? Every company is probably solving these independently. There are tools like you can have these databases, SQL, like you can have things in the databases, but the scripts to make things automated, simplified, and that maintenance, that piece is probably unique to every company, and everyone is probably reinventing the wheel. It will be good to have these open source tools that are maybe tested, validated, so you know you can trust the performance of those tools. And that would help a lot of the companies. I think that you don't have to reinvent the wheel from the beginning for every
Hmm.
key item because everyone has the same problem. They will all deal with massive databases and they will have version control, how that model worked, and you need the traceability of that model to the exact training data set. So you have to have these life cycle management related items. You have to customize those to your AI needs and solutions. So having some of these tools as an open source capabilities, maybe that could be the academic community might be able to provide some help and relief. So I think open source would be the way to go with some of these things. That will help to reduce the barrier for many companies, but they will also use more consistent tools uh, from the get-go and then build the right framework.
And 5 years down the line, when we say the OCT engines or AI architectures, when they're not just inherently, breast specific indicators, technology. If we zoom out, what is the operating room and the healthcare encounter around it looks like for you and perimeter in the next 5 years?
Um, I would love to see our device in every hospital where they are doing surgeries, and we are actually a ubiquitous imaging system, so we can image not just breast cancer but other cancers as well. So this positive margin problem is not a breast cancer problem. So I would love to see more AI solutions coming into the play, but in an ideal world, I think if we can make the device, like if we can move to also a cloud-based solution, this whole cybersecurity, if that part gets solved a lot easier, we don't have to deal with one hospital at a time with the IT security related items. Um, we can update our models a lot faster because you don't have to have the deployment problem. So you can have a
Hmm.
central server that is kind of cloud-based solution that just you just update it and make it more accessible. And if there's a way to uh, make the device easier to use so that we reduce that technical bar, I think that would be amazing to see. There's always something else to do for us, but basically, I would say ease of use, image interpretation, like make life easier for the surgeons and the patients. I would focus on those, and also uh, I'm quite excited about these Ray-Ban glasses, so this virtual reality. So you can really make things like we're right now still working on it one image at a time, but the real world is 3D. So to be able to do some kind of like a holographic view where we can look at it, okay, this is where the true cancer is. So make like it a lot more visual. That would be really exciting, I think. Will really help the surgeons to pinpoint where they see a positive margin.
And how do you see yourself, 5 years down the line in this field? Like, where do you see yourself try and create the most
Ah,
impact?
Great question. So I think I'm barely keeping up with the AI is evolving so rapidly. I think it's just day to day. I think it's keeping up with it. So it's my coding days was long gone, but then AI made it easier again. So now I became semi-dangerous with. So I continue to see myself like working on problems. That is the main motivation why I got into the healthcare in the first place as well. So keep building something better that also focus on the clinical impact, not just like a shiny toy.
Yeah.
You really make a change in the people's lives, meaningful contributions. So I've been doing this for more than a decade of leading teams building AI solutions. I expect I will be in this space. Hopefully, well, if AI doesn't replace us.
No, not yet. I mean,
Yeah.
no, I wouldn't say at least healthcare is like one industry where I definitely don't want to see any of these
Yeah,
replacements,
I
happening.
mean, like there are certain fields like you have to have a license to operate, like this, clinician, physicians, lawyers. There's some safeguards. So the AI places, I would say, it's like a wild west. You
Yeah.
don't know if the model comes from a 15-year-old kid and then like what kind of formal education they got. So to look at the numbers, this whole trend of I think with AI, coding becomes more efficient, and then AI does most of the coding. That's a bit scary. Basically, where the field is evolving. It's hard to predict. I think where we would be. I mean, look at the first instance of ChatGPT. Like everyone was thinking, oh, this is like a lot better Google search. Like everyone was using like search interaction was ask a question, get something, and then now we have agentic AI. The decisions are you have these, and then you have swarm of these agents.
Yeah.
So we are limited by our lifespan to accumulate knowledge. So in couple years, look at where we are from an AI, like the initial LLMs to now with the agentic AI. Everyone is initiating some AI features. So it's really hard to predict. I think I don't want to out myself to say that I'm envisioning this like people are that's full of like the social media is full of these things like compute power is like plateaued this type. You have these bold things, everything's invented, could be invented or invented, and then you just prove people wrong. So yeah, I can't really see the end of it within 5 years where we would be, but I am happy to be part of the journey and I'll try to learn as much as possible. Um, it's a bit a challenge. We're now born to the AI world, so the new generation, they
Yeah.
are. So I'm curious to see how this generation that are living in the AI world will work and in the marketplace, the job space, and also what they can imagine and invent. I think that would be a completely different story than us.
Yeah, I think absolutely. Not just even 5 years down the line. I have to say,
Yeah.
like 2 years, 1 2 years, you start seeing like a very different world.
Yeah, when AI first evolved, like I was in like still heavily involved in academics. Normal academic work is basically you come up with an idea, you build your data, you come up with the results, and then you try to publish it in a journal. And that was once you submit it to a journal, they will reject it, they'll give you some feedback, or you get a major revision. So it was months long iterative process.
Yeah.
That process did not really fit well with AI evolution to the point that people are like, by the time we get the reviewers' feedback and respond to it, the model is no longer the state of the art. You don't have the sort of like you cannot publish it because what you had the angle to publish became irrelevant. Someone else has a better model.
Yeah.
You cannot go now. I'm the fifth best model. I'm publishing. This is how I get there.
Yeah.
So because the novelty piece is rapidly evolving, the AI community pretty much shifted over to archive. Like you just bypass the review process in journals. A lot of really good high-end academic work comes into you post your own work and your results archive. It's not there is no it's self-regulated in a sense. You do your best transparent. You don't have a reviewer to tell you this is scientifically sound. You let the readers become the judge of your publication, but you move on. So publication became instant.
Yeah.
That's how AI changed this whole academic endeavor with AI related models. People start publishing, even academics in the archive. So I expect the same thing to happen across the board with AI. Things are rapidly evolving. The timelines are really short. So anything that is long will be absolute, and then something else will replace that, and then there will be a different path. So the speed, the way we need to operate is that's it's also scary as well. So I think the expectations from the leadership is like, okay, instead of like 6 months now, in 2 weeks you have to come up with a new model. Like, why is it not taking that long? So how do you manage that type of thing? So we all have to be master orchestrators of these AI agents and use the tools a lot more efficiently. So we'll see.
I mean,
Future.
it's promising, but it's at the same time, like scary as well, because we're starting to read these news. I just read the Anthropic founders have called for a pause on
Yeah,
AI
Stable. Yeah,
developments.
they
Yes.
they pulled it
Now,
off.
is it just like a something to say, like, if in the future for most of it goes south, they will say, "Hey, we said, let's take a pause. Let's see where we are right now,
Yeah,
where we are heading, because the speed is not really making sense, right now."
yeah. I mean, my field is still regulated, so we are kind of seeing a bit of a slower
It's
penetration. But you
yeah.
are really exposed out there with AI. Anything that is available is fair game. How does AI impact your life, and how did it change so far?
Well, let's hope, the industries at least that deserve the most beneficial impact gets the most beneficial impact, and healthcare for me,
Sure.
at least we can truly see some impact, in the future, because that is where, I would say one would can truly be impressed by how AI is benefiting humanity and societies at
Yeah, I
large.
am really envisioning we have these AI hospitals, like the PCPs might become predominantly the AI-based doctors that are making some calls, because I think the AI will have a better chance of consolidating all the data and then look at it, and then you can make the best decision to guide the patients to the right entry point. So I don't think it is uncommon to see patient get some symptoms, and then they get referred by the PCP to one area, and then they just reroute it again based on the initial tests. So AI could really eliminate a lot of the waste and inefficiencies that we have. It's human nature, so that's I really see AI to change how we are doing day to day. Like the self-driving cars, like you don't have to learn how to drive at some point. Basically, it would be a different experience. Same thing
Mm.
with here as well. Things, I think everything will change, but I'm excited that it will change for the better. Um, let's hope that we just built the right frameworks to not to abuse the AI. Yeah,
That is the question at the end of the day.
it is. Yeah,
Yes. Well, as this concludes our conversation. But thank you so much,
my pleasure.
for truly enlightening conversation, and I hope to have you again. Yeah, with this truly remarkable achievement. I'm sure we're all excited to see what parameter comes up with next as well, specifically in additional cancer indications, medical equipments as well.
Absolutely. I have you on my LinkedIn. I'll keep in touch. And best wishes.
To you as well. To you as well. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you again.
Take care. Bye.
Take care. Bye.